Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch. This is a fairly typical monster taming RPG, with captivating visuals that take full advantage of the unique art style of Studio Ghibli, a renowned animation studio from Japan. And this is one of the worst games I've reviewed in the Best and Worst series so far. To be fair, most other games I've discussed are major favorites of mine, but even so, Ni no Kuni has very little worth experiencing, and is a perfect example of style over substance game design. I don't normally start these with such a negative tone on the game I'm covering, but I really had to push myself to finish Ni no Kuni and its optional content, excluding the extensive Alchemy completion. Full disclosure, I completed Ni no Kuni back on the PlayStation 3 about a decade ago. I did not have very positive opinions of this game even back then, but I was feeling good about trying out the HD version on the Switch. I like monster collecting games, and this edition included some new familiars I couldn't use in the original version. But my god, did I forget what I was getting myself into. In this video, I'm going to lay out what I found to be the best and the worst aspects of this game. Be warned that full spoilers for Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch are on the table. The best. Number 1, captivating visuals. Are you surprised? By far the most noticeable aspect of Ni no Kuni is its enchanting and colorful art style. It's a unique look that's aged really well. Character and creature design is expressive, with the bosses in particular conveying striking personalities. Environmental lighting and visual effects accentuate the vibes of each location with a great amount of variety present. It's easy to feel immersed when traveling through such lively locations. You have your typical settings like a fiery volcano, an ice cavern, and an autumn forest, but the standouts are easily the spooky themed areas. The Tombstone Trail and the Miasma Marshes are aesthetically very effective. Indoor settings have some really nice architecture, lending them some character. Towns, while simplistic, give off active communities with constant chatter. Attacks from both bosses and familiars deserve recognition for how well crafted their animations are. The animated cutscenes do fit the aesthetic, but they're fairly rare and ultimately forgettable. Still, they supplement the overall style of the game nicely. It's no wonder this is the first quality that comes to mind when one thinks of Ni no Kuni. Number 2, familiars. A great monster catching game needs to have plenty of creatures with appealing designs and variety. Ni no Kuni's remaster contains 79 different families, with 4 familiars in each of them, so there's no hurting for options. They're nicely animated too, with a great sense of energy and quirkiness. Some of my favorites include an eccentric balloon creature, a knight-like beast with wings on its head, a mysterious wisp, and the best of all, a lynx themed around the duality of light and dark. Absolutely gorgeous. There's enough here to get attached to, but not all of these designs feel finished, with a fair amount of filler monsters padding out the numbers. The best decision with familiars is when they evolve into their final forms, you get to pick from 2 different varieties, each with their own abilities and designs. Split decision making for creature evolution feels very personal, because you can tailor pick their paths to your liking. It's exciting to see what your familiars will look like in their final transformations, and you can even get duplicates if you want both versions. Creature collecting fans can spend a lot of time getting their teams just the way they want them. It's fulfilling to make your own choices, and one of the strongest qualities of a monster taming system. Number 3, the Wizard's Companion. The Wizard's Companion is exactly what it sounds like, a thorough learning text for the training wizard, and this thing is awesome. It's basically an entire guidebook for everything in the game, and I don't mean like a walkthrough or anything like that, but a believable interpretation of what a wizard would use to make their way in this world. It's filled with information about familiars, alchemy, magic spells, town history, and even a series of short stories fleshing out the world further. It's a very absorbing aspect of the game, and really helps put you in the position of a training mage, helping to create an immersive gaming experience in an authentic way rarely seen. You'll fill it up throughout your playthrough too, which is surprisingly satisfying. It also also hosts some really charming old-fashioned artwork, and you can even research familiars in advance to hunt down for your party. A lot of work clearly went into crafting this book, and I think it really paid off, as it's by far the most magical element of the game. Number 4, the Crypt Casino. Casinos are a pretty common inclusion for a lot of RPGs, and Ni no Kuni's is an instant classic. To start, it has a novel horror theme that's very colorful and hosts to a bunch of skeletons and ghosts. That's a really refreshing take. The games on offer are all fun and easy to understand too. Of course, you have slot machines and blackjack, which work in their usual ways, but Platoon is a surprisingly addictive card game of strategy and guessing that's fairly easy to rack up consistent wins with for enormous payouts. There's even a game where you move Oliver and Esther through a maze at the same time using different control sticks. It's nice to have this kind of variety. What pulls the whole place together is how rewarding everything is to play, so you don't have to dedicate tons of hours of your time for it to be worth it. A few essential items can only be bought here as well, so it's fulfilling to engage with. This is one of the better casinos I've experienced in gaming, though I admit that number's not at all high. Even so, it's well implemented and memorable. Number 5, a few more things. I'm just gonna list these off. The music is of pretty good quality, with a few great tracks like the one you're hearing now. Unfortunately, many of them are overused, and the battle theme in particular will have you ripping your hair out before long. Flying around on the dragon is a lot of fun, and especially empowering since ground traversal is so slow. Menus, item icons, and tutorial graphics are attractive and easy to interface with. The primary antagonists, Shadar and the White Witch, are well designed, both giving off creepy and powerful vibes in different ways. Shadar's voice work is the best in the game, though with line reads like this:
"We found Coolan!"
It's not exactly a high bar. His Castle of Nevermore is a feast for the eyes, with its sinister, intimidating atmosphere. The White Witch's ivory tower is also visually enchanting, with a strong final dungeon feel to it. Plus, I absolutely love her beast form. Just gonna linger on that. Worth calling out some of the inspired sequences, such as Mummy's Tummy, a trip inside an enormous fairy godmother, and of course, the entire zombie death rain portion of the game. I'll definitely remember this part. But that about covers everything I enjoyed about Ni no Kuni, so buckle up for what comes next. It's all downhill from here. The worst. Number 1, the story. Talk about a dumb story. This is clearly one of those fairy tale narratives that's not meant to be taken too seriously, because my word, does it fall apart under any scrutiny. Kind of like a Ghibli movie. To start, it's a mess. Basically every narrative problem you can imagine. Plot holes are everywhere, what with time travel and linked souls being a thing. Convenient plot devices constantly show up. Almost every character is uninteresting, with incredibly banal characterization and little agency in the story beyond Oliver. Most story arcs feel like a complete waste of time and instantly forgettable. Antagonists who do nothing to actually stop you, but oh wait, never mind, the first villain is actually protecting the world in their wrongdoing, and the second has the vapid motivation of, I want to destroy everything because it's imperfect to create a new world, which is remarkably uninteresting. They're immediately reformed after being defeated and hearing a few generic statements about life and the difference between good and evil. Yikes. I'm going to start making amends by filling my own castle with flowers, then the people will smile. The whole game is running from place to place to talk to the next quote-unquote special person who arbitrarily unlocks progression forward, or grants you some magical BS. Don't know what to do next? Don't worry, a magical girl or other form of nonsense will randomly appear to move things along, or solve plot points the game doesn't know what to do with. P's entire existence as a character is some of the worst of it. Nothing makes sense when you break it down. A gate to town will be closed because a guard's broken-hearted, and instead of, you know, the other guard opening the gate, or him being removed from his post since he's clearly not doing his job, or anything that makes sense, you have to fix his issue to get the gate open. A port town has a problem with pirates fighting, so they decide to have everyone wear bathing suits. Because then no one can conceal a weapon and therefore nobody fights? What? When you first arrive in this magical world, everyone gawks at Oliver's clothes, too. Look at this, it's a shirt and overalls. You'd think he was on fire with this kind of reaction. The story makes no attempt to be engaging, which is a shame since the game starts off on a fairly gripping event. Topping it all off is the horribly dull writing. There is far too much unnecessary dialogue and text for getting across pretty much anything, even the most basic concepts. The characters never shut up, and considering how much reading there is, a very small amount of it is actually voiced, leading to a lot of slow, long-winded discussions. Don't even get me started on how unnecessary the entire White Witch storyline is. You'd think the title character would be a more crucial element to the narrative, but she comes off like a forced footnote at the end of the game. Perhaps I'm being too harsh about what is clearly a childish script, but for children or otherwise, it's boring, unintelligent, and shallow. Number 2, shallow game design. Level design in Ni no Kuni is incredibly bare bones. Pretty much every area is a smooth, winding corridor outside of the world map. Dungeons suffer badly from this, and couldn't feel more uninspired, with almost nothing in the way of compelling puzzles or layouts. It's running down paths and turning around when you hit a dead end. Find a chest, open it. Find an enemy, fight it. Town layouts suffer just the same, seeming a lot larger than they actually are, with almost nothing interesting about their arrangements and rarely any secrets to be found. You can't go in almost any buildings outside of the same few utilities every town has, so they feel extremely hollow. NPC dialogue couldn't be more mundane. There is no incentive to talk to these people. They never have anything thought-provoking to say, and like the main story, their dialogue's drawn out and terribly written. Side quests suffer a good deal from this, particularly the broken-hearted ones, which always boil down to, I have a problem, I don't have thing. Well, we should get this guy that thing, huh, Ollie boy? I have a lot of that thing. You can have some. Better use take heart then, huh, Ollie boy? The pieces of heart used to mend someone's missing characteristic are also complete nonsense. Most of them are interchangeable. Someone wanting to do something could be lacking enthusiasm, or confidence, or even belief. Well, wait, isn't belief in oneself confidence? Wait, ambition's one of them too? Just this one will fix them. Sure, whatever. Using magic to fix problems is an awesome idea. Figuring out puzzles with spells could be really satisfying. But repairing broken hearts involves no thinking whatsoever because the game tells you exactly what a person needs and exactly when a person is overflowing with something, taking all critical thinking out of the situation, defeating any point to the system in the first place. Most instances that require magic couldn't spell out the solution harder if they tried, taking so much away from being in a wizard's shoes. Side quests are also very basic. Picture the most bog-standard RPG quests you can imagine. I left my thing here, can you go get it for me? Can you defeat this monster? There's no attempt at making any of this compelling. Number 3, taming familiars. As a monster collecting game, when it comes to taming familiars, Ni no Kuni is a complete disaster. Have you played Pokemon? Well, I'm gonna use it as an example regardless. What if the only way to capture a Pokemon was to knock it out and then just hope that it joins your party? Wouldn't that be fun? That's this game. Recruiting familiars is complete RNG. If you beat one, it might decide to join you, and if not, then oh well. Game design. The only way to increase the rate of taming familiars is a fairly late game stamp that claims to increase the chance, but my god, you could tell me this thing does nothing and I'd believe you. And that's it. There's absolutely nothing else you can do to increase the odds of getting familiars. No skills that can help, items to charm them easier, nothing. This wouldn't be such a problem if the catch rates weren't so terrible. I've literally spent hours trying to recruit a single familiar, committing entire genocides of some species until finally getting one. Because of this, the most fun aspect of Ni no Kuni, crafting a team of monsters to use, is completely botched. Big shout out to when your teammates use an area attack to kill a familiar when you're trying to serenade it. I'll touch more on the AI in a bit, but it's clear it doesn't see letting you tame familiars as a priority. Also, only one character in your party can tame familiars, the one who also happens to die constantly. And did I mention there are even a few side quests that require certain familiars to be completed? Yeah, this entire system is a travesty. Number 4, Combat and AI. Ni no Kuni's combat system combines free movement and positioning with selecting attacks from a rotating menu. And almost nothing about this system is fun. Movement is slow and clunky, with characters repeatedly getting caught on each other, unable to find the path to enemies. Sometimes, instead of attacking, they'll walk around an enemy because they only want to strike it from the front, when they're right next to it. Familiars learn a host of different abilities, but there's pretty much no incentive to use them. Most attack abilities cost too much MP to ever be worth using, taking a lot longer to execute than just spamming normal hits. Status effects and elemental weaknesses aren't worth bothering with either, unless one can specifically open a boss's weakness. Every battle essentially winds down to spamming attack with your strongest familiar and healing when necessary. It's the most effective strategy for most of the game. Why bother creating all these attacks when they're barely worth using? It's all so poorly balanced, and the bosses are one of the biggest reasons why. Especially early on, you basically can't use familiars against bosses. They'll take a ton of damage and die in no time. So early bosses are all about running away while spamming your strongest spells. These fights don't feel like they were tested. Later on, when familiars are a bit better at holding their own, it's just an attack spam fest. Using any other strategy is wasteful and unproductive. All sorts of poor design choices are at play here. If a familiar dies, it also kills the owner, preventing any that aren't tanks from ever being used. There's also this pointless time restriction for how long a familiar can be out before it gets tired, which only drags fights out further. Way too much consideration was put towards restricting the player in battle, creating a system that's no fun at all to engage with. I haven't even gotten to one of the biggest reasons the combat fails so much. Ni no Kuni is known for having particularly awful companion AI. And yeah, they're garbage. They follow the same strategy in every fight. They blow through all their MP, run around for a moment, and die, even when significantly over-leveled. They require a lot of attention to use healing properly, and even when commanded to go on the offensive, they'll forgo using familiars in favor of just hitting the enemies with their useless basic weapons. And wouldn't you know it, you have no control over what they do. The only effect you have at all on AI behavior is a cheaply implemented all-out offensive or all-out defensive command, which triggers them to either use their strongest, most expensive attacks for the smallest enemy, or defend for what feels like little more than 8 seconds. These commands wear off way too quickly, so you have to keep inputting them. And if they're allowed to do what they want for even a second, you can expect them to start charging up their biggest damage dealer in the brief moment where you tried to give them another command. It sucks. They seem to just make random decisions during fights, like they'll throw a familiar out for maybe 6 seconds to do a single move or run around, and then pull them back and run at enemies to attack them themselves, even though they're weaker. Fights are completely scattered. In one boss fight, I needed to be healed, kept telling them to go on the defensive, but they wouldn't heal me, and they had the MP and means to do so. It's babysitting. Nothing about their decision making is conveyed, so you have no idea how they'll behave. Number 5, a lot of little things. I'm just gonna list these off. I don't like Swain. He's selfish and tasteless, and little is done to endear you to his character. He also has a really stupid backstory. I experienced 2 notable graphical glitches. One while flying over the Misty Island, which just doesn't render properly, and this bizarre instance during a boss fight where the terrain exists on 2 planes and is moving around? Ni no Kuni also crashed a lot on the Switch, and it was completely random when it would do so. Anyone who's played a long RPG without autosaves knows how painful it is to lose hours of progress. The stamp reward system has potential. It's basically like a skill tree, but the restriction of having to redeem all abilities before moving to the next row destroys anything interesting about the decision making, since you'll generally get the same ones around the same time. Gems teaching new familiar moves are unrewarding since, as I said, most of them aren't worth using. A lot of spells you collect throughout the adventure aren't actually usable, only serving to fill up the wizard's companion, which is decidedly disappointing when you get one that sounds interesting. The alchemy is offensively grindy, particularly the late game creations that require absurd amounts of rare enemy drops for one thing, destroying any motivation to bother with the system. Motorville is a bore whenever you have to return to it, and exclusively used for trivial, chatty busy work. You get a fast travel vehicle in the overworld as a final endgame reward, but it's definitely given too late, when everything else is done so you have no reason to keep playing. I mean, it's nice to get something significant for getting through it all, but it's still better to put these kinds of things somewhere in the main campaign. I'm certainly not going to get any use out of it now that I have no reason to play anymore. Last thing, this game is unapologetically vicious towards overweight people. It's pretty tasteless and comes off as dated even for its original release, and could be far more considerate with how it chooses to word things. I had a lot to get out. I think my problems can be summarized simply with Ni no Kuni just isn't fun to play. The combat is messy and unsatisfying. The story is mindless and boring. Some of the areas are lovely to look at, sure, but there's not much else here to really appreciate. Harsh perhaps, but genuinely how I feel about this game. I know it holds a special place in some hearts, and I can see how this game's magic can leave a strong impression. If Ni no Kuni is a game you love, I'm truly happy you can enjoy it. Everything has strengths and weaknesses, and only you can decide what those are for yourself. For me, Ni no Kuni is a shallow, aimless drag, and my god am I happy to be done talking about it. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked my videos, subscribe and check out my Patreon. I'll see you next time.